Now, this book is one of the few books out there that, if you really want statistics and numbers and quantitative data on people who claim encounters like alien abductions, his book is the best out there on that. There's another one that's a little more skeptical by a couple of writers, and now the name's eluding me, but they focus on the abduction phenomena from the perspective of it being sleep paralysis, which is another area of interest to me. But now, I really like books with long subtitles, and there's a really slim book. It's one of the slimmest books I've ever seen on the UFO subject, and yet it seems to really be the best at quantifying Jung's ideas about UFOs, and puts forth an idea that I think may in fact be darn close to the mark. And that is Dr. Greg Little's book, The Archetype Experience, Resolving the UFO Mystery and the Riddle of Biblical Prophecy Using C.G. Jung's Concept of Synchronicity. Now, I don't know if he solves the riddle of biblical prophecy, but the book basically puts forth this idea that there are what he calls materialized archetypal splinters. He basically points out that the archetypes represent polar opposites, and that it's often said that 80% of UFOs are in fact IFOs, misidentifications of identifiable objects, if you just have enough information. Well, he suggests that UFO haystack, that 80% of those misidentifications, are an integral part of the UFO phenomenon. That it's those misperceptions that often can trigger the same kind of experience that he thinks is a contacting of something alien or other. His idea is basically that when someone sees a UFO, if there's a corresponding bubbling up in that person of one of the archetypes, that's what will sync that person with the phenomenon and make it something significant for them. In other words, that will create a meaningful coincidence, a synchronicity that will then imbue that experience with meaning. Now, this can happen, and I've seen it described in many other cases from researchers like Jenny Randles and others, where the perception of a known IFO, something that's just absolutely verifiable, they did not see anything more than a mundane object, but they perceived it as something extra mundane, and they seem to have had one of these experiences. Now, that's just the 80% haystack part of this. That other smaller percentage of true UFO encounters, he believes, are physical manifestations of Jung's archetypes. He envisages the archetypes as existing in what he describes as the superspectrum, that those parts of the energy spectrum that we can't see with our normal eyes. You know, we have a lot of equipment to detect and perceive radio waves and television waves and infrared and ultraviolet, but those are all part of the same spectrum of energy that we're all bathed in and enmeshed in. And just like John Keel suggested that the dematerialization we see of UFOs could simply be them moving through that portion of the visible light spectrum that our eyes can see before they move back into either end of the spectrum, the ultraviolet or the infrared. Dr. Greg Little believes that these archetypes are autonomous and have a will of their own. Now, again, he's one of these people, he's giving his interpretation of Jung's ideas of synchronicity, the collective unconscious, and archetypes. There's a lot of people that would probably disagree with him, but I've also found a lot of other researchers that seem to agree with more or less the same idea, even without knowing anything about Dr. Greg Little. Now, Dr. Little is I believe, psychiatrist. He works in the prisons, works with, inmates. He's also very much into Edgar Cayce. He's into the Native American mound culture that dots the American countryside. He's a very interesting fellow, but I don't agree with all of his ideas, but I think he's on to something here. And he's one of the perspectives that I think some folks might want to check out more. And then there's that guy, Robert Anton Wilson. In his book, The New Inquisition, he introduced me to this idea of Poe logic, which is basically just a brainstorming tool. It's simply putting a Poe, P-O, between two seemingly disparate things that you normally wouldn't have any thought that they would have any connections, and just kind of free associating and seeing what ideas come up. And so he started talking about some of the things that he had started contemplating: UFOs, Poe national debt, pornography, Poe Bell's theorem, and UFOs, Poe rabbits. And I remember reading that and just thinking, what the hell is he talking about? And he pointed out that there's a strange bunch of connections between UFOs and rabbits. Now, this probably doesn't mean anything, but he listed a whole number of things that he found in the UFO literature, from UFO occupants seen stealing rabbits from a hutch in Italy in the 1950s, a UFO-naut in one incident looking like a giant rabbit, an abductee working with Bud Hopkins who recounted seeing hundreds of paralyzed rabbits, Ms. Trent's encountering a UFO while out feeding her rabbit, tales of jackrabbits dancing in the road prior to the sighting of a giant white UFO, and Southern England encounters where a witness saw the regionally known Bunny Man immediately following her sighting of a UFO, and the Bunny Man said to her, "Please pray for me." Well, that's all weird enough as it is, but within weeks of reading this, I was talking to a coworker of mine, and she tells me about her UFO sighting as a child. And wouldn't you know, she was a teenager at the time, and she had gone outside to get her little sister, who was tending to their rabbits. Now, this teenager who was going out to the rabbit hutch turned and saw a white egg-shaped UFO over what she thought might be an oak tree. And this is all happening in Middlesex, Massachusetts. And she saw this egg-shaped UFO over the tree because her brother had had a sighting, and because she'd heard of all the abduction stories, she became very frightened and grabbed her sister, and they ran back into the house, and she's trying to get her parents' attention, and she sees it moving across the yard until it just goes away and disappears in a purple flash. Well, okay, it's just a synchronicity. It's just a coincidence. It may not be a synchronicity unless I imbue it with meaning, but it was meaningful to me because I'd just been reading about rabbits and the idea that there might be some connection. So this may be, an example of the interactiveness of the phenomenon. A number of UFO researchers have pointed out that, including John Keel and even Stephen Greer, have suggested that the phenomena seems to be interactive. It seems to pick up on the thoughts of those investigating it and reacting to it, whether it be crop circle researchers who think about a design that has not yet been created, and the next day, boom, there it is in a field, to John Keel talking about ideas that he would have and not tell any about the UFO phenomena, only to days later get a phone call from a witness who described exactly what he had been theorizing. There seems to be kind of a feedback loop there. Now, in Dr. Little's Archetype Experience book, he relates his theory also to Robert Anton Wilson, who had the idea of the synchronet, that there's a state of mind that we can enter into that allows us to perceive those interconnections. And that's what he called the synchronet. Now, Jacques Vallée, in his 1979 book, Messengers of Deception, kind of posited a vaguely similar idea, and it's kind of exemplified in a strange encounter he had. He was investigating contactee cults, these groups of spiritualists and religious people who were beginning to believe in salvation from UFOs. And one of the groups he was investigating had an old biblical name called Melchizedek, the Order of Melchizedek. So he's investigating this, and the way he tells the story, one day he was going back through his receipts for all his travel and research, and he noticed that a cab ride he'd taken in L.A. was signed M. Melchizedek. And he looked up this person's name in the phone book, and sure enough, he somehow, while he was researching Melchizedek, had managed to get a lift from the one Melchizedek in all of L.A., or the only one he could find in the phone book. Now, Vallée is a computer scientist, so he's used to dealing with information, and he's used to the ideas of information theory. And this and other experiences led him to suppose that maybe the nature of reality is like a computer bulletin board, that somehow when we put our intention out there in the universe, that the universe will, per our request, bring us into contact with that information. So in this case, he was asking the universe for information about Melchizedek. Well, he didn't quite know about it until after the fact, but it seemingly had. Perhaps these things are all connected. This Robert Anton Wilson's idea about synchronet and Jacques Vallée's idea about informational bulletin board aspect to the universe. I think there may be in this some clue to the way magic works. Now, sticking with Robert Anton Wilson and rabbits, in his Cosmic Trigger Volume 2, there's this quote that just floored me. The puka takes many forms, but it's most famous when he appears as a giant 6-foot white rabbit, which is the form most Americans know from the play and film Harvey. Whatever form the puka takes, he retains the special ability of his species, which is like that of Thoth in Egyptian legend, Coyote in Native American myth, or Hanuman, the divine monkey in Hindu lore. He can move us from one universe or belief system into another, and he likes to play games with our ideas about reality. Well, to me, that sums up the UFO phenomena, and I think goes to the trickster archetype aspect of the UFO phenomenon. Now, let's move into the realm of dreams. There's a lot. This actually, I guess I really found out about these interconnections through the book I mentioned earlier by Dr. Kenneth Ring, who was, of course, researching near-death experiences, then started researching alien abductions. But he also drew upon the areas of false awakenings, out-of-body experiences, and lucid dreaming.